Set in a gritty, murky, snow draped city of New York, we follow a man driven by his anger and yearning for revenge. Max Payne, a cop gone undercover after his family was mysteriously murdered. We see Max infiltrating the mobsters and sleazy establishments, chasing goons over the rooftops and fight fanatical psychos and a corporation. It's an obviously thrilling ride, spiked with action, and Max's tough guy voice sets just the right tone for a hard boiled story. Some people might go as far as to call the story a bit cliched, which it is to some degree. I mean, come on, we have the NYPD detective with his family dead going on a vengeful killing spree. We have the city where the weather's never right, there's convoluted grapevine of the underworld, and not to mention Mac's tough guy narration. It won't be wrong to say that Max Payne utilizes more than a few tropes of the hard-boiled genre. But the game also manages to make an interesting point: drugs. The drugs and their addiction in Max Payne is not merely played as a plot device, not just a narrative plank that bridges the gap between two fragments of a story, but it is the very way drugs and addiction are depicted that is intriguing. The drugs in the narrative play a significant role. It is strangely symbolic. It may sound a bit odd now, but everything falls into place when you dig a little deeper. To understand it, we gotta start from the beginning, or as Max puts it, to make any kind of sense out of it, I need to go back 3 years, back to the night the pain started. Part 1: The Beginning of the End. Max is an NYPD detective working in the Hell's Kitchen. He's living the American dream: a beautiful wife, a baby girl, house by the riverside, and all. But dreams have a nasty habit of going bad when you're not looking. We find that his family has been brutally murdered by a couple of junkies who were high on a drug named V. This marks the beginning of disintegration of Max's character. After losing his family, Max transfers to the drug enforcement and then infiltrates the mob families of New York to track the producers of V. In the beginning chapter of the game, Max finds himself at a subway station to meet his friend Alex, who, at the end of the chapter, is shot in front of Max's eyes, a death for which he will eventually be framed for. This is another loss for Max, another death of a loved one that he couldn't stop. By now, Max has already become the world weary anti hero that we are so used to seeing in film noir genre. Part 2: Down goes the roller coaster of hope. There is obviously a lot of shooting and chasing and jumping over the rooftops and a lot of convoluting underworld politics. That's a lot more fun to play in the game, but not really necessary to our analysis. So let's jump to the points that are crucial. The first is Jack Lupino's character, and second is a revelation that happens in a later chapter. But we'll get to that. So let's begin with Jack Lupino. Max finds Lupino at a nightclub named Ragnarok, which in Norse mythology means a time of utter despair and destruction and hopelessness. By the way, Max has lost his family and his only friend by now, and oh, he's killed a lot of people too. Lupino is flying high with the weed drug in his veins. He is high as the sky, yelling out all the stuff a Satanist would be proud of and howling like a rabid dog. It's only with Lupino that we get to see the worst effects of the weed drug. Max obviously kills Lupino at the end of the chapter, but ends up getting himself drugged too by a woman named Mona Sachs. To be honest, in my opinion, getting that kind of closure after finding so many goons and defeating Lupino is a total bummer. It's like the narrative itself is trying to tell you no matter how badass you are or no matter how hard you fight, your victory is also a defeat. But anyway, in the next chapter, he wakes up in a basement with a foggy head and quite some injuries. What happens here is again a lot more fun to play in the game and not crucial to our analysis. So let's just jump to the chapter we talked about, that is playing it Bogart. Payne's explanation that he is playing it Bogart means he is conducting his investigation with extreme self confidence. And let's move to the third part, part 3, V for Valkyrie, V for Valhalla. In this chapter, Max is navigating through a facility where the testing for V drug was done. There, he finds some files on a computer that talks about Project Valhalla. According to the Norse myths, Valhalla is the place where brave warriors are taken in afterlife. It's the place where they'll spend the rest of their time feasting and battling. And the Valkyries are the healing deities that carry the warriors to Valhalla. At the end of this chapter, the facility self destructs and the chapter concludes with Max walking out while the flames and destruction gobble up the background. Max started it all by following a trail left by a drug named Valkyrie, and he ends up finding an operation named Valhalla. The references, the metaphors, and the visuals used here pretty much speak for themselves. Part 4, They Were All Dead. Now let's skip over to the end where Max kills Nicole Hone, CEO of Acer Corporation, that had been funding the production of V. By now, Max has killed a backstabbing partner, the Godfather Punchinello, made friends with a Russian mob boss, and also managed to get dosed with V and runs through the ever elongating haunted hallways of his old house where the wails of an infant and shrieks of his dead wife echo around. He also discovers the inner circle and Alfred Wooden, who becomes an ally who promises to help him get out of jail if he kills Nicole Hone. And Max keeps the promise. There's a lot of shooting, a lot of action, and a lot of bullet time, and a lot of hard-boiled monologuing. Max fights and succeeds in killing Hone. Wooden has a smug look on his face which indicates that he will help Max get out. And Max has a smug smile on his face too because he has emerged victorious. His family has been avenged. His demons are finally over. Dead. His nightmare is now finally over. But is it? Part 5, Drug and Pain. As I've said earlier, the use of drugs and addiction is not played as a mere plot device. The drugs in Max Payne are not a gimmick. Valkyrie V is the drug that brings out your violent self and makes you do the stuff that you obviously wouldn't do if you were sober. Max, after losing his family, becomes something that is beyond hopeless. He has already realized that morals are useless in a world where he is living. Though he succeeds in killing Nicole Hone, he knows that it is not going to bring his family back. And although that just makes sense, but there's not even any catharsis in knowing that all the bad guys are dead, because Max eventually ends up getting backstabbed in the second game by the Russian mob boss he had befriended in the first game. For Max, it's never going to be over. Drugs are addictive, and the repetitive use of them disintegrates and decays the human being that is consuming them. Drugs, which can be confused for a medicine, are not a solution to any problem. Drugs don't heal the pain, they just make you forget about it. They are not a solution, they are just a distraction. Max Payne's anger driven revenge, although satisfying, is in a similar way not a solution, because his quest for vengeance has neither resurrected his wife and daughter nor they have rid the world of evil. Max's problems aren't solved, but by the end of the game, they lose their physical shape or form and become something psychological, something that will keep tormenting Max for the rest of his existence. Because although his friend and family were avenged, he is still alone. And not just that, but everything that has led to this point has reduced him to a creature who has lost his reputation, his career, his loved ones, and also his hope. Because amidst all the grittiness and the ruggedness of the setting and the good old fashioned revenge plot that drives the story, Max Payne is a game that maybe consciously, maybe subconsciously asks a question: does revenge matter even if it doesn't solve your problems? And in that sense, Max's vengeful attitude becomes a metaphor for drugs, a substance that doesn't solve your problems but merely makes you forget about it while you're still high, and in turn disintegrating your whole being into a self pitying creature. And that's what Max's character has become by the third game.